Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today I'll be teaching you how to pace the SAT Writing and Language section. Keep in mind I've scored perfectly on the SAT Writing and Language section on back-to-back SAT tests, so I would say that I'm definitely capable of giving you some good advice on how to pace that section in order to maximize your potential score and make sure that you're getting the most out of that time that you spend taking that SAT Writing and Language section. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with my tips and advice. So the SAT Writing and Language section, if you're going to know how to pace it, you want to know how much time you're going to have in total. Now you're going to have 35 minutes in total for that SAT Writing Language section. Okay, now in that 35 minutes, you must answer 44 questions. Okay, so if you were to just do the math on that, just simple math, the time per question that you have on average, if you don't use any time at the end to check your work, would be 47 seconds per question, or about 48 seconds per question. Okay, so that would be if you were to have no time left over at the end, no time to check your work. All of your time is just spent answering those 44 questions. With that 35 minutes, you would have to average about 48 seconds per question in order to answer them in that amount of time. So what is my recommended strategy? Okay, so I've obviously done fairly well in my opinion, scoring perfectly back-to-back SAT tests on the writing and language section. So what's my recommended strategy for this section? Well, my recommended strategy, it consists of multiple parts, but it's more so focused on strategies as you go through it than picking and choosing certain passages. Okay, so let's just quick run through what I would recommend doing to pace the SAT Writing and Language section. So the first thing that I would do is I'd quickly read through the passages, right? So as I'm going through and answer my questions, and let's just go ahead and start from the beginning to make this simple, right? So I open my, they say turn to section 2, they say that you're ready to begin, right? The time starts. Here's what I do for my SAT Writing and Language section. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just read through my passage, and then as I get to questions, I'm going to answer them. Right now, as I read through this passage, I'm not reading through it like I do for the reading section. There are two completely different ways to read through the passages. For the reading section of the SAT, you're looking for things like themes, tone, evidence, claims, things like that. Now, for the writing and language section, what you're looking for is you're reading for tense to see what kind of tense you're in the passage, because you probably have to answer a question on tense with a verb. You're reading for if your subjects are singular or plural, if your verbs are singular or plural to match their subjects. You're reading to see if there's any parallelism. You're looking to identify the order of ideas, the order of sequence of events. You're looking at modifiers. You're looking at identifying independent and dependent clauses, the relationship between ideas, and things like that. So you're looking at more of the grammatical things and the way that the passage is structured as a whole. So what the order of idea is, flow of information, things like that. Okay, the next thing, if you ever see a 1 at the start of a paragraph, then what I recommend doing is finding the sentence that you're going to be asked to place. Okay, so if you see a 1 at the start of a paragraph and it's right next to that sentence, so say for example, I'll quick write an example. Say that we have a 1 like this, and then we have, we'll say that it's the, and we'll just call it subject, right? It'll be some subject of a sentence, right? But you have the start of your sentence right here, and you have a 1 placed next to it. Well, that's telling you you're going to have to end up placing some sort of a sentence or be asked if you're supposed to add some sentence somewhere. So what you're going to want to do then is you're going to want to find the question that's asking you about some certain sentence, and whatever sentence it's asking you about, go ahead and read that sentence first before reading that whole paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to put this in blue because it's really important here. You're going to want to find the sentence you're being asked to place, okay, and come up with what should be placed before it and after it. Okay, so let's say, for example, I was asked to place sentence 5. So I see that I have a 1 at the beginning of my paragraph. What I'm going to do before I start reading that paragraph is I'm going to go find that sentence 5, and I'm going to read sentence 5. Now, after I read sentence 5, I'm going to come up with what should be placed before it. So, for example, if in sentence 5 it said something like, Jonathan Samuel implemented his idea of increasing the molecular weight of iron or something like that, then I would look to see something before that talked about who Jonathan Samuel was, and then after it something about the effect of him trying to increase that molecular weight of iron or something like that. Okay, so when I read that sentence, I want to come up with what should come before it and what should come after it. So then what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to then, as I read through my paragraph, so at that point I go back and start at the beginning, as I read through that paragraph then, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to answer any questions within that paragraph as they come up, because that way I don't have to reread. So as I'm reading through that paragraph, I'm subconsciously trying to place that sentence. So I'm reading through it, I'm answering any questions that come up just as I read through it, just like I normally would. And then whenever I spot what I said should come before it, that's when I look to place it. Okay, so keep in mind at that point that I know what I'm looking for. So I'm answering my questions. Let's say then I see something about Jonathan Samuel, right? Then I know that I'm going to want to place it after that. Okay, so that's how I know how to place it. So that allows me to place that sentence without having to read through my paragraph and then see, oh man, I gotta go place sentence 5. I need to read through my whole paragraph again, because that's going to end up wasting time. Okay, so the most efficient way to do those questions where you have to place a sentence is to read that sentence first, come up with what should come before it, what should come after it. Then what you do is you go through, you read through your paragraph, answer any questions as they come up in there, and then place it ultimately where you find is the best spot. So where you find matches what you came up with for what should come before it and after it. Okay, so that's one strategy that I highly recommend using. The next thing we have is some questions require you to read on before answering them. So we have a couple examples of these questions here. So we have which choice best introduces, transitions, contrasts, or compares the previous paragraph with the next paragraph. Okay, so that's a type of question that you could see where the question requires you to read on before it's possible to answer it. Now another type of question you could see where you have to read on before you can answer it would be a question like this. Should this sentence be kept, added, or deleted? Now in a question like that where you're asked if a sentence should be kept, added, or deleted, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to know the context surrounding that sentence. So you need to know what comes after it. Because if what comes after it doesn't make sense for that sentence to be kept or added, then you're going to want to get rid of it. Now if what comes after it requires that that sentence needs to be kept in order to make sense, then you know you need to keep it. Okay, so understanding that certain questions are going to require you to understand what's going on around it, so understanding the context there, and sometimes that means you have to read on before you can answer them. Okay, some other types of questions like that would be a question that asks about which choice introduces the information that follows it. In that case, you need to know the information that follows it to know which choice is the best answer there. Another type of question like that would be which choice is consistent with the writing that follows, right, or the examples that follows, or the evidence that follows. In that case, you need to know that evidence or examples that follows in order to answer that question. Okay, the next thing we have is, in this case, read on and answer all questions, right? So if you have any type of these questions 1 through 4 here, any type of those examples, you're going to want to read on and you're going to want to answer all of the questions that come up as you read ahead to go through and answer those questions. And then once you have the information that you need to answer that initial question, then you go back and answer that question. So what you want to do then is you want to just keep reading until you get enough information to go back and answer it. Now as you read, you want to answer any questions that come up at that time, so that way you don't have to reread that section again for the rest of the questions. Okay, the other thing is the passages. So the passages, I just recommend going in order of 1 through 4. There's 4 total passages on the SAT Writing and Language section. I would recommend just going 1 through 4 because there's really no way that you can know which one will be easier and which one will be more difficult. So the best way to do that one is just to go through 1 through 4. Okay, the next thing I have is going through questions as you see them. So I already talked about that a little bit, but you only really want to skip a question is if you need more information in order to answer it. If you can answer a question without going through and finding more information, then go ahead and do that. Some questions you do need more information, in which case you skip it and you answer those questions as you go through them, as you search for information. So that's what you want to do there. Okay, the next thing we have is this helps avoid rereading text, as I already said. Now, you also want to try to answer all the questions in about 25 to 30 minutes. So here's the reason. So you have a total of 35 minutes on the SAT Writing and Language section, but you want to answer all the questions in 25 to 30. Now why is that? Well, first of all, obviously this is going to give you a little bit less time on average per question. You have about 34 to 41 seconds per question on average this way. But what this will do is it will give you 10 to 5 minutes at the end to check your answer sheet and compare it to your test booklet. Okay, and this gets into something that I call a bubbling strategy. Okay, so this deals with timing and pacing with the bubble sheet, because obviously you have a test booklet on the SAT and you have a bubble sheet. And you have to make sure that you have your answers in your bubble sheet, so you have to convert them from your test booklet to your bubble sheet at some point using some strategy. Now, most people don't think about this strategy when they take the SAT, but they really should, because it can save you a lot of time. Okay, so I'm going to talk here about the importance of having a watch and using a bubbling strategy. So when you take the SAT, I recommend having a mechanical watch, because if you're going to have a watch, it must be mechanical and cannot make noise. So you would take one that's mechanical, and I recommend starting it at midnight at the start of every single section. So for example, at the start of the Writing and Language section, you started at midnight, press start. You know you have 35 minutes, so you know down to the second then when that timer is going to ring and when you're going to have to be done. Okay, so how does this help with our bubbling strategy? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to want to circle our answers in our test booklet as we go through, right? So you're answering questions in your test booklet as you read through and answer questions. And then once you've answered all of the questions on a single page, then at that point what you're going to want to do is bubble it in on your bubble sheet. So once all of the questions on one page, which will usually be about 3 to 4 questions, that's when you're going to want to go ahead and bubble in those 3 to 4 questions on your answer sheet. Because by doing that, you're only converting answers from your answer sheet or from your test booklet to your answer sheet pretty much about one time, right? Now, if you were to do it after every question, then you're going to be going back and forth between the two a lot, and that's going to waste time. By doing this, what you're doing is you're minimizing the amount of time that is spent transferring answers from your test booklet to your bubble sheet, which ultimately saves you time and gives you more time to spend on the questions of the SAT writing and language section rather than just filling in bubbles. Okay, the next thing you want to do is you want to watch the time as it gets towards the end. So here's why this is important. Because if you're going to use this bubbling strategy, once there's less than 5 minutes left, at that point you want to abandon that bubble sheet strategy. At that point you just want to fill in the bubble sheet after each question, because at that point you're kind of running behind on time if there's less than 5 minutes left and you don't have everything answered, and you want to get as many points as you can, and you don't want to end up having 4 answers on your test booklet that you forget to convert and put on your answer sheet. So if there's less than 5 minutes left, then you just want to fill in your bubble sheet after each question. But for that first 30 minutes, you're going to want to make sure that you're answering all your questions on one page, then bubbling in on your answer sheet all of those answers at once to save you time. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and jump back up to part G and F, right? So I talked about how this is going to give you 10 to 5 minutes to check your answer sheet and your work if you follow that 25 to 30 minutes of time spent answering your questions. Okay, so at that point, what do you want to check in that final minutes? Well, in those final minutes, what you're going to want to check is your bubble sheet. You're going to want to match your bubble sheet to your booklet. So I kind of already talked about that. So once you finish answering all your questions, what you're going to want to do then is you're going to want to go through and make sure that everything in your test booklet matches what you put on your answer sheet. So that right there, that should take less than a minute, right? You're just going through, quickly checking, make sure everything in your bubble sheet matches what's on your test booklet for your answers. That shouldn't take long. Typically, it takes less than 60 seconds, anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds. As far as what we're going to do after that, so let's say at that point you have 7 minutes left or 8 minutes left. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to check the questions that you're most unsure of first. So if you're ever unsure of your answer on a question with the SAT writing and language section, put a star by it, and then that way you know at the end when you have time left to go back and check those ones first, because those are the ones you're most unsure of and those are the ones you're most likely to get wrong since you're the most unsure of that answer. Okay, so you're going to answer those first, and then you're going to work your way through the questions to the ones that you're more confident of. So you start with the ones that you think you're most likely to get wrong or that you're most unsure of, and then you work your way then to the ones that you're more competent in checking those answers. So that pretty much takes through the SAT writing and language pacing guide that I kind of have. It's different than the SAT math and math with calculator, math without calculator, in that it doesn't really have question difficulties getting more and more difficult as you read through the SAT writing and language section. It's more so just being able to identify strategies that you can use to save time. Okay, so one of the strategies you can use to save time that I talked about in option B right here, or in I guess we'd call it outline B, was if you see that number 1 at the start of a paragraph, and that means you're asked to place a sentence, and if you're asked to place a sentence, then you're going to want to go find the sentence you want to place, come up with what should come before it and after it, and then use that then to place that sentence as you read through your passage. Okay, other things. Okay, I talked about how the reading is different. I talked about the average time that you're going to need. Okay, the other thing is if you're ever asked a question, you need to read on to find the answer to it. Make sure that as you read on, make sure you're answering those questions as you read. That way you don't have to go back and reread afterwards. Okay, and then going through the passages in order 1 through 4, going through the questions as you see them, like I talked about. This helps avoid rereading text. You want to finish in about 25 to 30 minutes. This means you're going to have about 34 to 41 seconds per question on average. And this would leave you with 10 to 5 minutes to check your answer sheet and work. I talked about the bubbling strategy. So that right there, that pretty much takes us through everything I wanted to cover for the SAT writing and language section. As always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe if this video is helpful. You can find our 90-day free SAT prep series on our channel in our playlist. So be sure to check that out. And with that, that is the end of the video. Make sure to have a good day.